she bore 14 children with her own brother, the purest woman from the Kentucky forests. What would you do upon discovering that your family conceals secrets so profound they could shake society's very foundations? The Appalachian Mountains hold stories that seldom reach our ears, lost between isolated valleys and communities living on the fringes of time. Today, I will unveil to you a case that lay buried in shadow for nearly 2 centuries. Martha Sullivan was no ordinary countrywoman. Within her womb, she carried the weight of a family tradition that defied the laws of nature and society. What you will learn in the coming minutes may forever alter your view on the limits of family loyalty and the price paid by those born of pure blood. If you enjoy historical investigations that reveal the darkest truths of the human condition, be sure to subscribe to the channel immediately. Prepare yourself for a story rarely told outside close academic circles. A narrative showing how isolation and distorted beliefs can create generations marked by a devastating genetic legacy. Among the deep valleys and green hills of Kentucky, where sunlight barely penetrates the dense tree cover, only stacked stones and rotting boards remain. These are the silent traces of the Sullivan property, founded in 1798, a place the local inhabitants avoid to this day. The wind whistling through the ancient oaks seems to carry whispers, as if the earth itself remembers the children born there with deformed faces and incomplete minds. When we look upon these ruins, we must understand we are not merely seeing the remains of a house. We are facing the physical testament to a terrible philosophy, the belief that family blood purity must be preserved at any cost. The farmland, far from the thunderstorms that often punish these mountains, witnessed the muffled cries of babies born with extra fingers and malformed hearts, while the family patriarch, Ebenezer Sullivan, proudly declared, "Our blood will remain pure as gold, untainted by outsiders." Dark clouds gather once more over the ruins, an omen of what is to come in this story. If you wish to follow more cases like this, which stir society and reveal hidden truths, subscribe to the channel so you miss no investigation. The Sullivan property spanned roughly 320 acres of rugged land in Harlan County, Kentucky. A 2-story wooden house of 8 rooms stood at its center, surrounded by barns, stables, and smaller huts for hired hands. The family maintained a rigid internal hierarchy. Ebenezer at the top, followed by his sons, then Sullivan-born women, and lastly the temporary workers who never stayed more than a season. Each day began at 4 a.m. with the clang of an iron bell echoing through the valley, calling all to their duties. Women spent 16 hours daily preparing food, weaving clothes, and tending to the young, while men worked at hunting, farming, and occasional trade with distant villages. Control was exercised through constant surveillance. Strategically placed windows allowed Ebenezer to observe every movement on the property. The family chapel, built from dark oak trunks, hosted not only prayers but meetings where marriages between cousins and close kin were decided. The creak of floorboards announced the patriarch's arrival, bringing absolute silence. When snow covered the mountains and isolated the property for months, births occurred in the basement of the main house, away from outside eyes. It was during the particularly severe winter of 1823 that Martha Sullivan entered the world, her penetrating blue eyes seeming to hold a knowledge far beyond her years, a child who unknowingly carried the future of the family lineage in her womb. Martha Sullivan grew displaying extraordinary skills that set her apart. By age 9, she knew the medicinal properties of 73 different plants from the surrounding forests. Her ability to memorize biblical texts impressed even the itinerant pastor who visited annually. While other family girls remained confined to the property's limits, Martha received special permission from her father to accompany men on occasional trading trips to Cumberland Village, 12 miles away. On these rare forays into the outside world, she carefully observed social interactions, absorbing information about medicine, law, and world news, while never revealing details about her own family. Within the Sullivan community, Martha held a privileged position. She was the only woman allowed to attend family meetings where important matters were discussed. People from the surrounding area sought her healing skills, allowing her to cross the invisible border between Sullivan isolation and the rest of society. "The girl has the gift of healing hands and a tongue that does not speak lies," the locals said, trusting her while remaining fearful of the rest of the family. On full moon nights, Martha could be seen gathering specific herbs that only bloom in such light, moving like a shadow among the trees, carrying knowledge passed down through generations of Sullivan women. The paradox resided precisely in this. The more valuable she became to the external community, the more indispensable she was to the family's internal plans, especially to her brother Jeremiah, only 2 years older, who watched her with growing interest as they both matured. Leave in the comments, never give up the truth, if you believe justice must reach all the oppressed. The horrors on the Sullivan property manifested gradually, like lengthening shadows at dusk. First came whispers about the birth of cousin Robert in 1825, born with 6 fingers on each hand and unable to make any sound but primitive grunts, kept in the attic and fed through a hatch. Then came cousin Elizabeth, born in 1827 from a union between uncle and niece, her skin bearing bluish spots and eyes so distant they seemed unable to focus on the same object. In 1829, Frederick was born to first-degree cousins. By age 3 he could not hold up his own head, dying during a violent seizure before turning 5. With each problematic birth, Martha watched the adults' reactions, denial, rationalization, and finally, supernatural or religious explanations that never questioned the practice of consanguineous marriage. When the daughter of cousins Henry and Victoria was born without eyes in 1831, Martha witnessed Patriarch Ebenezer declare, "It is a divine trial, not a sign to change our ways." Martha's inner transformation began quietly then, like water slowly eroding stone. Her face remained impassive as she helped the midwife, but something fundamental shifted within. In her diary, found decades later, she wrote with trembling letters, "I saw the eyeless face of an innocent today, and realized it was not God who created this incomplete creature, but the choices of men who consider themselves above nature's laws." Martha's world collapsed on April 16, 1834, when her youngest sister, 9-year-old Sarah, was declared ready for the family pact. Sarah, a girl with a crystalline laugh and golden hair, was the only person Martha openly showed affection. The two shared a small room under the main house's roof, where Martha secretly taught her sister to read and write, contrary to family rules that deemed female education unnecessary beyond basic domestic knowledge. That spring morning, Sarah was taken to the family chapel, where the patriarch announced her future marriage to their 42-year-old cousin, Herbert Sullivan, known for his cruelty to animals and violent temper. When Martha protested during the ceremony, she was forced to witness her sister's punishment, her hair forcibly cut, followed by 3 days of confinement in the granary without proper water. On the 3rd day, when Martha was finally allowed to bring water to Sarah, she found her sister burning with fever, delirious about black angels with iron claws. Martha spent 72 uninterrupted hours applying cold compresses and preparing medicinal infusions, holding the small, fevered hand in her own. At dawn on the 4th day, she felt Sarah's fingers go limp. With no tears or outward mourning, Martha washed her sister's body with wild rosewater, wrapped her in the white linen she had woven for her own trousseau, and placed a small cloth doll, Sarah's last secret gift, beside her before burial. That night, alone under a canopy of stars, Martha took a silent oath before the simple grave. For every unshed tear, for every stifled scream, there would be a reckoning. The system upholding the Sullivan property was one of mutually reinforced authority. At its center, 63-year-old Ebenezer Sullivan ruled with an iron fist and religious rhetoric, citing distorted biblical passages to justify isolation and internal marriages. His firstborn, Jeremiah, 25, administered physical punishment, having developed methods that left no visible marks, using wet towels to beat transgressors. Uncle Thaddeus, Ebenezer's younger brother, supervised financial aspects, making semi-annual trips to sell the property's goods and buy supplies, occasionally bringing desperate women from distant villages to partially renew the family blood. Reverend Blackwood, not a relative but complicit for convenience, visited quarterly to officiate unions and baptisms, receiving generous compensation for his silence. The growing tension reached its irreversible point during the celebration of Ebenezer's 65th birthday in October 1836. Before the entire gathered family, the patriarch announced, "To ensure the continuity of our purest lineage, I declare that Martha and Jeremiah will unite their lives and blood at the next full moon." Martha, then 19, watched her brother's face break into a smile as relatives applauded. That same night, listening at the door, she heard Ebenezer's detailed plan revealed to Jeremiah: "You will produce the next generation of Sullivan leaders. Your children, born of our lineage's purest blood, will be raised under my direct supervision to continue our tradition when I am gone." Martha understood then she had reached the point of no return. It was not just her future at stake, but generations yet unborn. On November 7, 1836, Martha was subjected to the purification ritual preceding all Sullivan marriages. Naked and bathed in herb-infused water by 3 elder women of the family, she remained silent as they sang old songs from the British Isles. Her long brown hair was braided with white ribbons symbolizing purity, while Aunt Agnes whispered instructions on marital duties, the details turning her stomach. Dressed in a white nightgown made for the occasion, she was led to the center of the family circle where Ebenezer and Jeremiah waited. The patriarch took her right hand in his son's left, lifting them overhead as he proclaimed, "This blood belongs only to the Sullivans, will remain among the Sullivans, and generate new Sullivans." The ceremony was interrupted when Martha suddenly fainted, falling hard against the wooden floor. The family doctor, Dr. Thompson, an alcoholic whose medical license had been revoked years prior, diagnosed it as mere feminine nervousness and recommended rest until the wedding day. During her supposed recovery, Martha was kept under constant watch in the room she once shared with Sarah. Through the narrow window, she watched the wedding preparations, the chapel decorated with pine boughs, the new cabin being built for her and Jeremiah, relatives arriving from neighboring properties. Her once expressive face became an impassive mask. "The girl has lost her soul," one aunt commented. "It is the price of purity," replied another. On the night of November 11, 1836, Martha executed the plan she had been silently crafting since Sarah's death. Using knowledge acquired over years of observation and secret study, she mingled a combination of sleep-inducing herbs into the celebration drink. While the Sullivans drank and celebrated the upcoming union, Martha remained sober, watching as eyes grew heavy and movements slowed. When the last guest, including her designated guards, fell into deep sleep, each element of her meticulously structured plan clicked into action. First, she retrieved from a hiding place under a loose floorboard a small bag of gold coins collected over years by secretly selling medicinal herbs. She then donned a set of men's clothes she had prepared, cutting her long hair short with a knife kept sharp under her mattress. She gathered a group of 5 children, all born with deformities from consanguineous unions and kept hidden in various corners of the property. With silent, precise movements, she led the children from the main house to the stable, where 2 horses were already saddled. The date was no accident, she had chosen the new moon for maximum darkness. The countdown in her mind had finally reached 0. "Today we are born again," she whispered to the frightened children as she helped them mount. Back at the Sullivan property, wedding preparations peaked. Oil lanterns lit the path from the main house to the chapel, where a drunk Reverend Blackwood rehearsed the ceremony. In the bride's chamber, 3 aunts arranged the white dress over an empty bed, arguing over who would place the traditional family veil. In the kitchen, a whole pig roasted over the fire while women prepared bread and sweets for the 2-day feast tradition demanded. Meanwhile, miles away, Martha executed each phase of her plan with watchmaker's precision. In the shadows of the dense forest, she applied dark dye made from walnuts and charcoal to the children's faces and her own for camouflage. 2 of the little ones, unable to ride alone due to limb deformities, were secured to her with leather straps. The oldest, a 12-year-old boy who had never developed speech but understood instructions, held the reins of the second horse, where 2 other children balanced. The distant sound of music and laughter faded, replaced by hoofbeats on soft forest soil and the occasional call of an owl. As the first dawnlight tinged the horizon, the small group reached the plan's first stage, an abandoned hunter's cabin 15 miles from the Sullivan property, where Martha had secretly stockpiled supplies for months. The prearranged signal, 3 short whistles, confirmed they had reached the first safe point. In the early hours of November 12, 1836, Martha Sullivan carried out her plan in meticulously timed steps. Phase 1: Infiltrate the patriarch's quarters where family documents were kept. With silent movements learned from observing hunters, she retrieved birth certificates and the family record book documenting generations of consanguineous marriage. Phase 2: Strategic isolation, cut the alarm bell ropes and remove wheels from carts to hinder pursuit. Phase 3: Liberation of the hidden children, 5 little ones kept in secret compartments due to visible deformities. For each adult who had participated directly in the cruelties, Martha left a specific mark. For the uncle who had flogged Sarah, a strand of her sister's golden hair upon his pillow. For cousin Herbert, intended for Sarah, a child's drawing the girl had made weeks before her death. Leaning over a sleeping Jeremiah, she whispered in his ear, "Sullivan blood ends here." In Patriarch Ebenezer's room, she left the record book open to the page documenting 23 children's births and premature deaths in the past 15 years, all with congenital deformities, with a single sentence written in the margin: "It was not God who created these monsters." By the time fire began to consume the barn where Sarah had been punished to death, Martha was already guiding the 5 children down a forest trail, leaving behind only silence. The exodus she led followed a precise script. First, the stop at the hunter's cabin to exchange horses marked with the Sullivan symbol for less identifiable mules. Then, they split into 2 groups for lower visibility, following secondary trails and avoiding main roads where news of their escape would surely spread. Martha had prearranged a meeting with Rebecca Thornton, a midwife and herbalist living on society's fringes who sympathized with her cause after treating Sullivan children. In Rebecca's simple home, Martha organized a makeshift ritual. She cut a lock of hair from each child, burned them along with the wedding dress she had secretly taken, mixed the ashes with soil, and planted a young oak in this symbolically enriched earth. "This tree marks the end of one cycle and the beginning of another," she explained to the wide-eyed children. The plan accounted for calculated resistance. Martha knew some children, conditioned to the oppressive environment, would fear the unknown world outside. For the 6-year-old girl who refused to leave the hiding spot at Rebecca's, she softly sang old lullabies until the child slept in her arms. For the older boy who tried to flee back to the Sullivan property, she offered no orders, but a choice, the first true choice any Sullivan had ever received. When they finally departed, they formed a small column, Martha at the lead, each child carrying only a significant personal object, Rebecca at the rear. In the distance, smoke remained visible, a gray column against the November blue sky, marking the place where generations of Sullivans had perpetuated their cycle of isolation and genetic decay. News of the events spread like wildfire in dry grass. The Harlan County Sheriff, initially reluctant to investigate the isolated family's internal affairs, was forced to act when flames consumed part of the property. His official report, preserved in county archives, described with bureaucratic language what he found: structures damaged by seemingly deliberate fire, several individuals in a comatose state from an unknown substance, and the disappearance of an adult woman, Ms., and 5 minors. Correspondence between local and state authorities reveals growing alarm. The Sullivan case represents a potential threat to social and moral order. Maximum discretion is recommended. By December 1836, records indicate 3 other isolated Appalachian properties with histories of close-kin marriage suffered similar events: missing children with deformities, compromising family documents mysteriously exposed. In February 1837, the Kentucky governor received a confidential report mentioning the emergence of a Sullivan method, a term describing the systematic release of children from consanguineous unions and exposure of family records. The press of the time, limited by social conventions, only indirectly referred to disturbances in isolated communities and renewed authorities' interest in marital practices in mountainous regions. Among families keeping similar traditions, however, panic was palpable. Private documents reveal frantic correspondence: "We must disperse the children immediately." In contrast, hopeful whispers circulated among marginalized communities and abolitionist groups about the woman who frees the forgotten. The state's response to Martha's escape and subsequent liberation wave was swift and severe. In March 1837, Governor James Clark secretly authorized a special force of 6 experienced rangers, led by Captain William Harrington, a veteran of indigenous wars known for relentless efficiency. Using tracking techniques honed pursuing fugitive slaves, they followed the group's trail across 5 counties. A progressive siege strategy gradually shrank available hiding territory while agents infiltrated marginal communities, trading rewards for information. The first capture came in April 1837, 2 children found in a Shaker community that had welcomed them without question. By June, the siege tightened when a traveling merchant, tempted by substantial reward, revealed he had ferried a short-haired young woman with 3 deformed children across the Ohio River. The final betrayal came from an unexpected source. Reverend Michaels, who had initially offered sanctuary in his rural church, gave up their location after authorities threatened to investigate his own questionable finances. The decisive confrontation occurred on August 17, 1837, in an isolated cabin near Cincinnati. Unofficial reports describe how Martha, realizing they were surrounded, organized the escape of the remaining 3 children through a pre-dug tunnel while she stayed to delay pursuers. Witnesses say when rangers broke down the door, they found her calmly seated at a table, the Sullivan documents arranged before her, a small empty poison bottle in her hand. Her last words, recorded by Captain Harrington in his personal diary, Sullivan blood now runs free in the world. You will never find them all. In the decades following Martha Sullivan's death, her story evolved from family scandal to regional legend. In isolated Appalachian communities, a body of oral tradition grew around her figure. Hunters swore they saw a short-haired woman guiding children through forests on moonless nights. Midwives discreetly offered protection to newborns with deformities, citing Martha's way as justification. Families practicing consanguineous marriage reported nighttime visits from a female presence, leaving small cloth dolls like the one Martha placed in Sarah's coffin a silent warning. Objects associated with her story took on near-mythical status. The Sullivan family record book, partially burned, passed through many hands before being anonymously donated to the Kentucky Historical Society in 1867, where it remains an important document on period marital practices. In isolated rural communities, folk songs preserved her memory in coded verses. The midnight lady takes the marked small slash when the moon hides and the watchmen fall. From 1870 onward, a significant decline in close-kin marriage occurred in the mountain regions, a phenomenon academics attribute to growing social and economic integration, though local tradition credits the Sullivan effect. Discreet pilgrimages to Martha's alleged burial site, an unmarked mound near the Ohio-Kentucky border, became an annual tradition among families with histories of congenital deficiencies. In stark contrast to official records that minimized her existence, popular memory transformed Martha Sullivan into a lasting symbol of resistance against practices sacrificing innocent lives on the altar of distorted tradition. In certain isolated Appalachian communities, even today, when a child is born with extra fingers or other signs of consanguinity, elders whisper, "This child has Martha's touch." If you have watched this far, it is because you care about the stories that have marked our country forever. Leave a comment saying, "I watched here, so I may know you," and who truly cares about the search for historical truth. Like this video if Martha Sullivan's story touched your heart. Share it so that the memory of Martha Sullivan is never forgotten.